but I really am sad. And the church is supposed to help us with this issue, right? And sometimes that's why we go to church every week, so that we don't feel so sad. And it gives us that pickup, right? It gives us that pickup. And we haven't been able to go in some months. And so I wanted to have this conversation with a good friend of mine. Her name is Dr. Kelly Pearson Carroll, and she lives in the Indiana area. And so we have had this discussion about coming back to church, but really about how the virtual church is meeting our needs while we're separated. Or is it? So I want to bring her in so that we can start this conversation about I think I'm not, but I really am sad. And how is the virtual church meeting my needs physically, virtually? Hi, Dr. Pearson. How are you today?
Well, Pastor Chira.
I'm so glad that you're able to come with us and have this discussion on just us being in this place, in this new space. But before we start, just give a little bit of information about yourself.
All right, my name is Dr. Kelly Pearson. I am a licensed ordained minister. I'm also the Chief of Human Resources, Vice President of Human Resources for a company called Meridian Health Services. And what's interesting is that I decided to take a plunge that I never thought that I would take. And I actually left the city of Philadelphia to take a position in Muncie, Indiana. Two totally different places. So I am a person that's totally in transition. As people say, that I meet here, you are a transplant,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a whole different terminology that I'm not used to hearing. But it's all about starting something new, being in a new place at a new time. And I really think that it was all divinely appointed, anyhow.
So you took a launch.
Took a lunch.
You took a huge launch. You took a launch from a place of comfortability and familiarity, and you moved to a whole nother state and took a whole nother position. And you had key placement within your ministry as well.
Yes,
So you're not just a minister, but you are a key component within your ministry here in Philadelphia. Tell us a little about that.
correct. I'm one of the associate ministers at Faith Kingdom Baptist Church that had full reign of, running all of our youth programs and dealing with some of our women programs and really, sitting on the right side of my pastor. So anytime we had something or we were going to a meeting or was looking to strategize on new ministries, I have always been right there by his side. So I've known him for a long time. I understand his language,
Mm-hmm.
which is really unique. I always say that he reminds me of my father, and my father had a strong Southern drawl, and so does Bishop Scott. He has a strong Southern drawl. He is, a country preacher.
Mm-hmm.
And he will tell you he's a country preacher. You're not going to get a whole bunch of PhD stuff from him,
Right.
but he recognizes the importance of connecting with people
Mm-hmm.
that can build a bridge in areas that he may not be able to build a bridge in.
So that's that's key because since March there has been this separation, right? And being a country preacher or just a preacher in general, right? Our goal is to reach the people. Is to touch the people. Our goal is to make sure that we have that hand, right? Or that placement with them to help them through the things that are going on. And since March, we haven't really been able to do that. It's been a little difficult. So how have you or has the ministry been helping in this area of being virtual but still being able to physically meet the needs of the people or have that?
Well, let me explain something. When I arrived in Indiana was in December. So of course, being a woman of God, I wanted to make sure that I fellowshipped or found what you would call quote unquote, my new church home. And I
Right.
discovered here the churches here are so large. You know, um, I have to now rebuild myself.
Mm.
And I've discovered in trying to do that with ministries that are so big, they don't even know that I exist. So,
Right.
for example, we take the little things for granted, such as when someone says, will all of our new members please stand up?
Mm-hmm.
When you are in a smaller church body that don't have all of the bells and whistles, there seems to be more of a physical touch, mental
Mm-hmm.
touch, emotional touch. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I've learned in this journey, sometimes I'm excited because, with this whole transition thing, I can still get a touch from home,
Yes. Okay.
and we're not doing virtual like all other churches are doing, they're recording it um, via Facebook,
Okay.
but they're actually having church in their parking lot.
Really?
So people are still coming together.
Okay.
They can't physically touch one another, but you can see that familiar face in the car next to you. Whereas here in Indiana, it's more or less like they're standing behind the pulpit. There's really nobody else there, and
Right.
they're
Right.
preaching to you. But
Mm-hmm.
are they really able to preach to the needs of the
Of the
people where the
people.
people are at this particular moment? So,
Right.
in this particular moment, we're dealing with, yes, the pandemic, we're dealing with race relations, we're
Right.
dealing with political
Yes.
extremes, we're
Yes.
dealing with a lot of things. And so, you have to wonder, how are we taking care of the flock?
Right.
That's
Mm-hmm.
experiencing, depression,
Mm-hmm.
distress.
Yes.
Many people
Yes.
are grieving, so when you
Yes.
look at all of the things that have happened in 2020 since March,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to begin to heal our members? And
Right.
so is the answer virtual? Or
Is it?
do we need to figure out how to have that personal touch? Because right now, people need to be touched. Well, I'm definitely seeing a disconnect. It's difficult to reach people virtually. Yes, they can hear your
Mm-hmm.
sermon, you know, but God has given us five senses for a reason. You know,
Yes. Yes.
that don't just change because of where we are. You have, touch, smell, you have all of these different things for a reason. And everybody needs something different. Can virtual be a good thing for those that are sick and shut in and
Yes.
they have that deacon that's calling them or that pastor that's calling them and coming to commune them? I think that that's very different than what we're
Mm-hmm.
having now. What we're
Yes.
having now is, we're having the sermon, and that's it. It
Yes.
reminds me of being here. As I said, the churches here are very large, but it's like you go in one door, you hear the word, and you go out the other door.
Mm-hmm.
There's no transaction at all. Hello, goodbye, how are you, what's up? It's none
Right.
of that. You don't even get to say hello to your pastor.
E.
So it's almost like you have to figure out what that balance should be, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't forget about the needs of the people.
But here's
That
the
should
other
be the
thing
top
too.
priority.
And it is a top priority, but here's the other thing. So we're talking about the people being able to reach the leadership or being able to see and touch one another and have conversation, right, and be in communion with one another, right? But how about us as leadership? Because when we're up there and we're preaching and we're ministering to the people, we're actually looking out at the people and we're seeing what the needs are, right? And so God is able to direct us to minister where the people are because we can see them, right? We can physically see them. And in this virtual environment, it's challenging for us as leadership to be able to meet the needs of the people, which is why it's so important that we are in tune with what God is telling us all the time. We have to be.
And you make a great point there because without the Holy Spirit, it's difficult. If
Mm-hmm.
you are a minister, a pastor, that can't hear God and can't feel God, you're in trouble.
Woo!
You're
Yes.
in major trouble, but you have to always stay in front of your flock, so
Yeah.
therefore, in this pandemic, how often are you calling your membership? How often are
Yes.
you bringing them on, let's say, a Skype call, just so
Yeah.
you can see them and
Mm-hmm.
hear them? Because sometimes what you hear tells you where they are on their spiritual journey. You
Right.
know, what you see tells you where they are on their spiritual journey. And so
Mm-hmm.
you kind of need to have multiple touch connections in this virtual world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it goes both ways, right? Because communication goes both ways. You have to receive and give, right?
Hmm.
So I'm going
Agreed.
to take a pause right here. We're going to take a break, a commercial break, and then we'll be right back to finish this discussion.
You can join us virtually or at the church located at 458 East Rittenhouse Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Welcome back as we continue this discussion with Dr. Kelly Pearson Carroll on our virtual versus physical and how the church and leadership is able to meet these needs. So, we were talking about how the communication goes both ways, right? Do you see? Do you see that we are as a body, as the kingdom? I'm going to go to the kingdom. Do you see we as the kingdom are really able to reach and meet the needs of the people today?
I would say in a virtual environment, we have a lot of work to do in order to do that. I'm lenient. I understand that it's a new platform. And having the opportunity, and I call it, something that pastors don't want to say, but having the opportunity to church hop through this virtual world,
Mm-hmm.
I've discovered that there are some people that do it well and some
Okay.
people that don't do it well at all. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But what I don't know is I see what happens on Sunday. But what does the work look behind what's happening on Sunday?
That's a day.
So, how are they ministering to their flock Monday through Saturday? I know how they're doing it on Sunday,
Right.
but how do they know, what is happening with each individually? Or how do they know what's happening in a family collectively? All of the things that we know about one another, because the thing about church is it's about fellowship. So
It's right.
you may not get what you need necessarily from the pastor on Sunday, but I might see my sister that
Right.
will speak a word in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes up for what I did not get in the word on Sunday. So you kind of need all of it. You need the singing, you need the preaching, you need all of it.
You need all of it.
You know
Mm-hmm.
it can't be one size fit all. There's so many different approaches, and I think that this is challenging us to
Yeah.
now think outside of the
The
box on
box.
what should um, the kingdom of God what should
Mm-hmm.
that really look like?
Right.
You know,
And
and not
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
and to not say, well, let's just throw away the virtual thing. That's almost like saying, let's throw away our hymn books, you
Ooh,
know, because some days, we need to go back to those hymn
to
books.
a good
Sometimes
hymn.
that will meet somebody where they are. Sometimes we need an old quartet song. Sometimes you need to just go
Mm-hmm.
way back to nobody playing instruments and it's just the clapping of the hands and the
And the
stomping
stomping
of
of
the
the
feet.
feet. Yes.
So you have now multiple generations
Mm-hmm.
in the church. We have more generations in the church today than we ever have had before. So therefore, how do we minister to the baby boomers? How do we minister to the generation X, the
Mm-hmm.
generation Y, and the next generation that's coming? And it all looks different. But what I know is that holiness is right.
That's it.
And what the scriptures say is right.
That's it.
And it's not that we need to conform to everything. We just
Mm-mm.
need to figure out how to strategize to
Right.
make it work as a body of
Right.
believers.
Because it's not traditionalism, right? We got to get out of tradition because tradition is just coming to the church, right, and being there for 2.5 hours and sitting there and getting whatever you get and then walk back out and you're the same as when you came in, right? Now, the traditions of it and the repetition, right? So now we're out of our repetition. We're out of our norms and doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? I really do see that people have had to see God and learn God differently for themselves because I don't have the same thing over and over and over again. So now I'm at a place where I'm home and I have to figure out, do I really have relationship? Do I want relationship with God first? Do I really have connection with this ministry that I've been going to week after week, year after year? Do I really have connection spiritually as well as naturally? Right? So, what needs are being met by my leadership? But what am I putting into it as well? Because again, it's two-way. So, yes, like we have to figure out how to meet these needs, but there's a responsibility from those that are coming as well, right? And so I think the other thing is, when it does open back up, you know are they going to come back? Do you see, like, because we have to not be so traditional, but we do have to have the foundations, as you were saying, the foundation of the word. Like, that's what keeps us, that's what motivates us, that should be the driver, the foundation of the world. Fail not to assembly in the congregation of the righteous, right? But we're not
Mhm.
able to do that physically. So we are doing that virtually. But the separation brings about a sadness, right? Because there is still something that I'm missing. There's a void because, to your point, I'm used to seeing my sister every week. I'm used to, and we don't talk during the course of the week. Like, we don't,
Mhm.
our relationship is right here in this building when we come on Sunday. And that's it. But that relationship when we come on Sunday every week is important to me. That's a part of me. And now there's a
Mhm.
major part of me that's missing. And I might not have that person's phone number because my connection is only in that building. So there's a piece of me that's missing. Go ahead.
I tell people this all the time, even like when I'm preaching, and you and I have shared this probably 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, before you leave today, make sure you hug someone.
That's right.
And I say that because I recognize that we have some seniors that live alone.
Mm-hmm.
We have some adults that live alone that don't get a physical touch at all.
That's
And
right.
sometimes that physical touch is all a person needs.
That's
And
it.
so when we look at, are people going to come back? The answer to that question is yes, people are going to come back. But I do believe this, Pastor Chikira, that people that was empty when the
Mm-hmm.
church was open, they're still equally empty in,
When it
in this
opens back
whole
up.
virtual environment
Yeah.
because it requires you to do something to fill that void. I look at myself, being, as I said, I'm a person that has transitioned from one
Mm-hmm.
place to another. There is a big void.
Mm-hmm.
Is a void of what I'm used to, what I know, who who I'm around, who I want to hear from, who I call. And when you move, things change.
Yes.
The relationships you thought you had now looks a little different because in this whole world of virtual, you'll get an email, a
Right.
text, you know, but I don't function that way. A text is not going to give me what I need. And
Yep.
so often we would rather send a text than pick up the telephone to call someone, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
even know if that person you calling is suicidal.
Right.
You don't know if they're
Right.
suffering from a bipolar schizophrenic episode. You don't know if that person has heat. You don't know nothing. And
That's
so
right.
I think virtual and texting is making us lose the
And
touch, and it
so
reminds
is
me,
being on social media. So is being on social
yes,
media. It's because
yes.
there's no physical connection. Like it's
And,
all
and, you, and it
social
reminds
media
me of
is
the
so
woman with the
unsocial.
issue of blood. Right. She said, if I could just touch the hem of his garment, we're not
Right.
touching nothing.
Right. And we need
We're
to
not touching
touch.
a thing. And we need to touch.
And we need a touch. We need a
Hmm.
touch from the Lord. And it's so critically important that we get that touch, but not just a spiritual touch, but we need to have that that connection with one another. And that connection helps us touch one another and know where we are. And to your point, like I'm the same way. Like there are times when somebody will cross me and I pick up the phone and I just want to say hi. No, I
Hmm.
don't want anything else. I just want to say hi. Because I want you to know that somebody was thinking about you right now, no matter what's going on. And it might lead to a conversation, but it might not. But it's just so somebody knows that someone is thinking about you. But also to your point, like you talked about the generations and this virtual environment. It is very difficult. I'm seeing that it's difficult for the older generation because trying to figure out how to get online and how to get to the service and what am I supposed to do and they're deleting things like somebody might have put it on their phone or something and now it's gone, but and they were the pillars within the building, but now there's a void for them too. And we can't, and to your point, we can't even drive by to say hi because we have to stay distant.
6 feet.
And yep. And unfortunately, a lot of them are, they don't even want to open the door because they're so nervous about all of the information that they're hearing over the news and what family members are calling them and telling them, true or not. But they're secluded. I know people that have been in their homes since March and
Hmm.
haven't come out. And I call them and I have conversations with them, but there's a void and there's a sadness and there's a loneliness because they're so used to doing their routine and they're out of their routine and they don't have that contact that they used to have. What do you say, and how do you see to reach them in our older saints in this virtual environment?
I think that that's why, the conference calls, yes, it's old school, but it works for our seniors. You
Mm-hmm.
know, for all of them now they can be destructive with it, because once you get to a certain age, hey, you just don't have a filter. You just want to say what's on your mind, so
Right,
you have
right,
to figure out how to deal with that. But that's what I mean, that when we're looking at this thing, it's not a one size fit all. So just like we have that 740 service, and which most of the time our senior saints come to that 740 service, and then
right,
you have that 11 o'clock service, and this is if you're in one of those types of churches.
right.
But the same thing needs to happen even in this virtual world. They're not going to be able to do it virtually, so you may have to go to the old school conference call. But you have to keep in mind, we need our senior saints. That's where
We
our
need
wisdom
them.
come from. That's
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 right.
how we get to the next level. So we can't erase
Right,
we can't erase that. And I
right.
think that ultimately that's what we're doing. Because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, if you're not sitting with them, they don't know nothing about Facebook and this. I mean,
Right,
half of the stuff I don't know anything about
right.
Twitter. How do I tweet this? And I mean, and they're asking these questions. When you try to explain it, it's almost like
It's
speaking
fine.
a different language.
All right, so that was part of our discussion on how we are meeting the needs of one another in this virtual environment while we are having our missing pieces and we're sad and we have to be able to reach one another. We have to make sure that we are staying connected with one another. We got to make sure that the spiritual as well as the natural connections are there because they're important. They're important. And we're here. We're here. Listen, when you see that number that comes across your phone and you don't know what it is, pick it up because it just might be that person just to say hi. I thank you so much for joining us for the Pastor Chira show on tonight. And I look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of I Think I'm Not, but I Really Am. I'll see you then.